Welcome to another episode of the Human Factor podcast, where science meets the human experience. Today, we have a very special guest, Sahil Diwan, the CEO of SafKan Health. In this episode, we'll be diving into the rise of SafKan and its flagship product, OtoSet. We'll also explore Sahil's personal journey as a medtech entrepreneur, the company's impact on the market, and also look ahead at its future growth. Welcome to the show, Sahil. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Tim. Excited to be here.
Let's just jump straight in, shall we? I guess to get things going, can you share a bit more about your personal story? I think the audience will definitely want to hear how you came about going into the medtech industry, and obviously how your brother's experience with hearing issues has inspired you to kind of start the company.
Yeah, so it's probably a somewhat unique story in comparison to a lot of med tech companies. But the story really starts with my brother growing up, who's my co-founder. He would have to go to his primary care and sometimes the ENT every few months for an ear cleaning. His wax would just build up to a point where it caused muffled hearing or hearing loss. And at the time, we didn't really understand how big of a problem this was. We just kind of thought it was a problem that was more unique to him.
Right.
So, every few months he was visiting his primary care for an ear cleaning procedure, which the traditional method of it really is kind of medieval. It's like a
Right.
syringe or a spray
Yeah.
bottle with a kidney basin on your shoulder. You've probably seen videos of it. It's not fun for the provider who gets a bunch of earwax and water all over them, and it's
Yeah.
not fun for the patient either. So fast forward a number of years, and my brother's studying undergrad in biomedical engineering, and that's where he first comes up with the idea for our device to kind of really solve his own problem.
And I know you mentioned you started the company at the college apartment,
Yeah,
essentially with no
yeah.
funding. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we really did start incredibly bootstrapped to begin
Hmm.
with, and again, my brother was still in school when he came up with the idea for the device. So we would build prototypes in his college apartment. We'd have the engineers
Wow.
come over, and we'd work out of there. Again, it was like a pretty packed apartment. I would sleep on a little cot that we pulled out in the closet, and that's just where I was for forever. For the first few months of the company, and we would just 3D print everything. It was, we
Yeah.
would come up with designs, 3D print it, test it on small simulations that we set up. It was an incredibly scrappy way to start a med tech company, but it taught us a lot about efficiency and learning how to stretch
Yeah.
a dollar. And honestly, we got quite far with those early prototypes that allowed us to then start fundraising.
No, that's definitely one of the most unique stories I've heard in terms of how a startup has come about. Quite inspiring, in all honesty. And we've had a couple of discussions before prior to this episode. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were one of the youngest people to get FDA approval for OtoSet. Is that correct?
Yeah, which is pretty cool
Yeah.
to have, on the resume. But when we first started the company, we were in our early to mid 20s, and we first raised seed capital in 2018, and then we
Hmm.
submitted for FDA 510(k) clearance in 2020, making us, a really young team to get FDA 510(k) clearance for a new medical device and bring that to market. So, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing or how to do it, but luckily we found through accelerator programs like Dream It, Health Tech, and Texas Medical Center's innovation program in Houston, we found a great amount of resources with advisors and mentors who could walk us through the regulatory process.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's good that you had the help. I think obviously that must have been needed, especially being in the early 20s, going into such a huge industry, especially an industry that is as regulated as the medtech space. So it seems like you've come out of it for the better. What were the biggest challenges would you say you faced as a young entrepreneur in the space? What are the things that kind of you came across and overcame and got to the point that you're in at the moment?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things particular to our story and our experience. Number one, there were some good opportunities for young founders in health tech or med tech, but not as many as you would see in other industries like
Hmm.
software. It's pretty normal to be a young founder in the general software
Yeah.
space. But I think the big thing we faced was there were a lot of investors who didn't even think we'd make it to FDA 510(k) clearance.
Hmm.
So investors who didn't invest at first, but then came back and invested later.
Yeah.
That was certainly something to figure out. And I get it. We'd never done it before. Our team had never really done it before. We just had
Yeah.
advisors and consultants who were there to help. The other thing is we were creating a brand new market. Like, this ear care market that we'll talk a lot about doesn't really exist, or didn't really exist. It's a big clinical need, but there's no brand attached to this space. Like, you might have
Got
Sonicare or
you.
Oral-B for
Yeah.
oral care. There is no established company brand or, really standardized procedure around ear care.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of education and awareness building, which we've done a really great job of so far, but it is, again, an untraditional route for med tech.
I mean, I guess that leads us nicely to talk a bit more about the product that you guys have developed over the years. I guess to start things off, what makes OtoSet different from other solutions that are available within the ear care space?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, OtoSet is the only FDA-cleared ear cleaning device, which
Mhm.
makes a big differentiation from anything else that's out there. Um, Again, the space has a lot of kind of gimmicky products on Amazon. There isn't a lot of knowledge around how to take care of your ears or when you need to take care of
Mhm.
them. The traditional methods are messy, outdated. A lot of them are ineffective. OtoSet, what it simply does is, in a very unique design, our device looks like a pair of headphones. A lot of people say it looks kind of like an Apple AirPods Max or something like that. Um, and we wanted to make a cool looking product, which has really helped us as we serve consumers and patients. But we also wanted to make one that was a really consistent experience. So that was something my brother experienced growing up, was that when he would go into primary care or even to the ENT, a lot of the times it was the same clinician. So he was getting somewhat of a consistent experience. But if you would get a different clinician, his outcome and his experience with the treatment really varied from clinician to clinician. So our device automates the process, keeping it consistent between each patient. It really kind of sets the best practices there. And then it uses a combination of irrigation, what you might get done in the primary care setting, with microsuction, which you get in the ENT specialist setting. So we
Right.
combine those two traditional methods of ear care, or the ear cleaning procedure, into a device that's automated, reliable, and consistent.
And you mentioned obviously patient demand is huge for this product, given that obviously OtoSet is the only FDA cleared device out in the market. How are you guys educating both, I guess, the patients as well as the providers about the benefits of OtoSet and using the device?
Yeah, so this is, again, I think, quite unique. Our approach here is that we've learned a lot from when we started commercializing the product. We sold into hundreds of clinics across the country,
Hmm.
with varied success, right? So some clinics have really picked up the product, ran with it, and use it as a way to bring in new patients. And we
Hmm.
learned a lot from those kind of clinics. And then some of them, weren't able to really integrate the product into their workflow as we initially thought they might have.
Right.
Um, I think, one thing, again, that I'll keep saying is that ear care is a real clear need with people. We all clean our ears on some
Yeah.
level. Most of us clean it in a bad way with Q-tips, even though we know Q-tips are bad. But
I
we
only
don't know
found
much
out
about.
about that not too long ago.
Yeah,
That obviously
yeah,
with Q-tips, that if you clean your ears with Q-tips, it's actually damages the ear, pushes the wax even further deeper in.
that's right. We see a lot of patients. We know when somebody's a heavy Q-tip user. And the thing is,
Right.
yeah, it's becoming more and more common knowledge. They even have a warning label on most of the boxes now,
Mm. Yeah.
saying, don't use Q-tips in your ears. But people don't know what else to do, or how else to clean
Yeah.
your ears. And the answer is that for a lot of us, we don't need to clean our ears that much.
Hmm.
But for a big chunk of us, it's about 1 in 10 children, 1 in 20 healthy adults, and 1 in 3 people over the age of 65.
Wow.
It's a reoccurring issue where, like my brother, they would have to get their ears cleaned every 3 to 6 months to prevent it from getting to a point where it builds up and causes symptoms like hearing loss, tinnitus,
Mm.
itching, discomfort, and so on. So our strategy has really been, since early commercialization, to try and help serve the consumer demand directly. And the product's gone really viral on social media. It's gone over 250 million views at this point.
Wow.
The If you haven't seen our videos, just go to our website at otoset.com and you'll see what I'm talking about there. Ear care is really a space that gets billions of views organically on social media every year. It's a real problem for people, but there is no product or brand really associated with the space like
Mm.
Sonicare or oral BR for oral care. And that's what we're setting out to do, is really to position ourselves as the leading product, the thought leader, and the brand associated with ear care. So we've shifted our commercialization strategy a bit to
Mhm.
just selling to clinics and providing the product and the disposables, to actually funneling some of this patient demand to partner clinics and to some of the pop-up clinics that we are operating on our own.
Fantastic. I'm still thinking about the viral videos that you've got. Did you say 250 million views you've got across multiple social platforms? I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's exactly right. On Instagram, TikTok, Twitter or X,
Yeah,
YouTube, you'll on pretty much any platform you type in OtoSet, you'll find some video with tens of millions of views on it, whether it's from
that's
our
great.
direct accounts or not. Um,
Mm,
yeah, again, there's a real clinical need for this, but it's been underserved for a long time, and that's where we see the opportunity. And our go-to-market strategy is somewhat unique, whereas we do have the patient demand already. People are looking
yeah.
for clinics to go to, and we're in a lucky position to be able to funnel them to partner clinics to increase utilization and adoption of our device for the clinics
Mhm.
that have availability. But we've gotten to this point where we have more patient demand than the clinics have time slots or appointments available for new patients. So
Mhm.
at the same time, we've started to pop up our own clinics across the country and
Right.
serve that patient demand directly.
That's cool. I guess walk us through some of your funding journey. Obviously, we all know now how the company started, from bootstrapping to obviously raising a seed round in 2018 and then a Series A in 2022. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so 2018, right before then, we had won a pitch competition here in Seattle, and then we had gone into an accelerator program called Dream It Health Tech. And that's really where our funding journey started, was with Dream It
Hmm.
Health Tech. They took us in incredibly early. Adam Dakin actually is on our board. He was the one that ran the program at the time. At that point, we were really just an early prototype with some early clinical data that we had put together on a shoestring budget.
Hmm.
And one thing that Dream It did was they went out to all the healthcare systems and they really tried to understand how big of a problem this is and pull that data in their decision of which companies to bring into these accelerators. Again, that validated how big of a problem this was. We got into the accelerator, learned a lot through that process on how to fundraise,
Yeah.
and then ended up closing our seed round in 2018. That gave us the money to finish the product, or the first version of the product. We're in our
Hmm.
third version of the product today. So finish the product, finish up all the clinical trials, all the testing for our 510(k), and then our FDA submission in 2020. And then, with some of that money, we started early commercialization of the
Yeah.
product. So selling to primary care clinics,
Hmm.
selling to audiology clinics. We found out that earwax and hearing aids hate each other. So there's a really big need for cleaning
Right.
ears, yeah, in the
Yeah.
audiology setting. And then also in the ENT setting and urgent care setting and so on. So that was kind of the early part of commercialization that led to our Series A in 2022. Um, and then since then, it's really been trying to figure out how do you scale it from the few hundred
Hmm.
clinics that we're in today, just selling a product, to really taking advantage of all the patient demand that we have for our product and serving it, either through partner clinics like we do today, directly with our own clinics. And then soon we're also developing and launching a consumer version of the device where people could
Right.
buy it and use it at home to help prevent the problem.
Got you. And do you have a timeline for the consumer-based product, or is that
I can't say
something
at
that's
this
not?
point. We do plan to go
Yeah.
through the FDA again for it, but
Yeah.
I can't say that it's pretty far along.
No, that's fine. And obviously, you've hit early commercialization. What's next for the business and OtoSet? I know you said obviously consumer product is going to be one of the biggest focuses. Is it just going to be a matter of expanding what you guys have, going into more clinics, into practices, or is there anything else that you're going to be focused on within the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, we've de-risked so much at this point. We've really taken product feedback and incorporated that into the
Hmm.
product. Like I mentioned, we launched with our 1.0. We're on our OtoSet 3.0 now, which is a really stable and robust version of the
Hmm.
product. We are focused on creating more and more patient awareness and patient demand, not just piggybacking off the virality of the product,
Right.
but doing more focused tasks at the local level. So we want to
Hmm.
drive in patients at the local level to partner clinics and then to our own clinics. So we'll expand what we're calling our OtoSet certified network to be really robust nationwide so that we can at least serve the patient demand at a professional level for the
Yeah.
time being. And then, over the next few years, we expect to have FDA clearance and a consumer version of the product, which people can either buy through our clinics or directly online to prevent wax buildup from becoming to the point where it's a symptom, particularly for the people who really have this problem, so that they don't get to a point where they have hearing loss or tinnitus or discomfort
Yeah.
from wax buildup.
Right. Got you. And do you have any scope looking into international markets?
I mean, yeah, to be honest, our focus is mostly in the US. We do get
Yeah.
a lot of pull from countries like Canada, the UK,
Hmm.
Australia, and so on. But it's just such a large market here in the US that we're
Yeah,
focusing
that
our
makes
efforts
sense.
here.
Hmm.
But at some point, yes, the answer is at some point, particularly with our consumer device, we'd want to be international.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. And looking back, what's one piece of advice would you give to young founders trying to break into the medtech space? Like you said, obviously, I think it's unusual to have someone as young as yourself leading a startup and doing it successfully, like you have done over the last 5+ years. What advice could you give to people that are starting out that have got, I guess, prototypes or stories similar to yours and your brothers and want to break into the market? What advice could you give them?
Yeah, I'd love to hear some of the advice other founders have given to you or are on your podcast after I get through this. But I mean, for us, it's really been persistence. It's
Hmm.
been, trying to learn as much as we can from mentors, advisors, and consultants every step of the way, whether that be from the prototyping phase to how do you run clinical trials, to
Hmm.
how do you do the testing for your 510(k), to how do you even write and submit a 510(k), how do you work with the
Right.
FDA through that process, which for us was really great. I think we learned a lot about our product and about our service by working with the FDA. But to be honest, the hardest part has been commercialization. How do you
Yeah.
actually take your device out of a controlled setting like a clinical trial and integrate it into these clinics that are incredibly busy, incredibly overworked, and how do you find and serve that patient demand, whether that's through clinics or on your own? So I would say persistence is probably the most important thing, really managing
Hmm.
your capital well so that you have the time to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then when you find that go-to-market strategy that really works and scales, all the hard work and dedication that it takes to take that to the next level.
Great. Fantastic. Well, that's everything from me. Thanks so much for your time, Sale. This has been super insightful, and I'm excited to get this out for the audience to see.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Tim. Appreciate it.
You too now. Have a good one. I hope you found this episode insightful. I share weekly content on industry trends and talent insights over on my LinkedIn page at Tim Eramkhan. Together we're building a community, and the best way to grow is if you can share this episode with someone in the industry and consider subscribing. I hope you enjoyed the episode and see you next time.